So, are we allowed to think aloud here?
Yes.
Yes, you're allowed to think as aloud as you can.
Right.
So when you moved to the United States, you experienced similar things. I mean, they weren't even within the African American community here, but you dealt with it. It was kind of a dual sword. I think you called it like a dual-edged sword, where you were both black and Muslim, and Christian African Americans don't really appreciate Muslims, even if it's black Muslims, necessarily. At least a part of them. And so you dealt with hatred coming towards you because you're Muslim, as well as you even mentioned when you got on a bus, someone walked by and you were holding they rolled down the window, right?
Yeah.
They drove by, rolled down the window, and you were wondering, okay, what are they going to say to me? Is it going to be that I'm black? And then they called you a terrorist.
Oh, it was the other way around. I thought they were going to call me a terrorist because I was at a mosque. I was standing at a bus stop in a mosque.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh gosh. They just rolled their window down. I was like, oof. And this was in D.C. too. So, yeah, that was like a pivotal moment. Not pivotal, but it was really memorable for me in my college experience.
Was that an African American? Because you ended
No.
Oh.
It was white. There were two white girls, and I was standing by a bus stop next to a mosque. And they rolled their windows down, and they just looked at me. I was like, oh, they're going to say something Islamophobic. I already know it. Like, it was, I went to school during the Trump era. Like, I went to school when he's still president, but, like, when he was inaugurated. So I was already experiencing microaggressions left and right at that period. So when they just called me the N-word, I was just like, well, I guess I'm black today, because it's like, you know what I mean? It's either you're shitted on because you're black, or you're shitted on because you're Muslim. Like, they gotta find something.
Right.
So
The reason I just implied that they were African American was because you ended the poem with saying, isn't it weird to be called a terrorist by someone you call a
look
sister?
at you. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that would have referred to another piece, another poem I believe it's called Aswad. Yeah, I definitely there is racism in the Muslim community, but there is Islamophobia in the black community because our backgrounds aren't the same. Folks who are coming from who have their generation, their grandfathers and grandmothers were enslaved. They have a different history from me. They practice different traditions. They're different religions, literally. So when they open the news, what are they going to see? They're going to see bombs being blown up. It's not just white people saying that. They're going to see terrorism too, and of course they're going to see the hijab before they see my skin color.
My friend who's Hispanic, he's from Honduras, he even says that his own Hispanic family, whenever he mentions Islam around them, mention terrorism. You're like, dude, they're terrorists.
Yeah.
So it's not bound by color. It's not a
bound.
white thing.
Yeah.
A lot of Muslims tend to imply that it's just white people that think Muslims are terrorists. No, it's everybody basically who isn't Muslim kind of has the stereotype of Muslims.
It's an implicit bias. This is like the media has purposely done it to us. You know what I mean? And people of color need to also recognize they're not immune to society's, brainwashing.
Yeah. And it's, at the end of the day, as Muslims, we shouldn't really be offended by that as much as we should take the smart route, which is that, and I say this to any minority group, if you're facing hatred, you should fight that hatred with love. So when I know, and a lot of people, and I know this generation especially disagrees with my methodology.
Yeah.
But I think my methodology works long term. It doesn't work short term for sure.
Yeah.
I've had friends, white friends growing up, speak to me about how Islam is a terrorist, terrorist breeding religion, that all it is a violent religion, and in return I would smile at them and tell them, here's how it's not. And I would be kind to them. I wouldn't imply, or I wouldn't just say, oh, listen, you Islamophobe, you anti-Islamist, because that's not going to do anything. That doesn't solve our problems.
Do you think you telling them the so-called truth is going to do anything?
It did. It did. Now
is that going to work for everybody though?
It, even if it doesn't, I love to follow what Martin Luther King said, which is that fighting hatred with hatred never works. I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
Like he said, hatred does not drive out hatred, only love can do that. And I think that's a deep and profound statement, and it's so true. And I think our prophet, peace be upon him, followed that also. Even when he was being tortured, when he was being thrown at guts, when he was, all these horrible things was happening to him, he fought that hatred with love. And it's super weird. Like, imagine if I started insulting you, throwing derogatory terms at you, and you just smiled at me and were kind back. At some point, I'm going to have to, and if I've dealt with that in multiple scenarios where I've said something derogatory towards a Muslim or a black person or a Mexican, and all they did was come back with a beautiful word, then I'm at some point going to have to look at myself and be like, sounds like I'm the one that's violent. Sounds like I'm the one that's horrible, not them. You know what I'm saying?
Like, I understand your perspective. I feel like you're putting the responsibility too much on yourself, you know? You use the example of, the Prophet, peace be upon him, and MLK. But these folks also, or at least MLK went to jail. They boycotted. They did a lot of things that required justice and accountability and speaking up against people. So they didn't just take it with a smile and say, yeah, let me be your, just beat me up. You're right.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Like,
those people were really powerful because they stood up and they held people accountable. They took them to court. You know what I mean? They spoke against it. They didn't just take it.
Right, and it's definitely, what I'm not saying is to be passive.
Yeah.
A lot of people think I'm saying to be passive. No, again, in even my example, I explained to them how they are wrong. I did it gently. That's not being passive, that's actually being quite direct, but doing it in a way that's receptive rather than making that person start hating me even more and hating my people.
Okay, I understand where you're coming from. I feel like when it's certain people, I think that approach works, but with other people, it doesn't. I don't think if, a Nazi comes up to me, or if somebody with the Confederate flag comes up to me spewing hate at me, I'm not going to just try to give them a hug or tell them, smile in their face. Like, they don't owe that. I don't owe them that.
Oh, you definitely don't owe them
and I don't think you either,
I think I like the approach more. I think the approach is more effective.
I don't think it's always more effective. I think it depends on the person.
I would go as far as always.
Whew. So if a Nazi came up to you saying some stuff, you'd smile?
I would actually do exactly what you said you wouldn't do. I would hug him and smile and be like, but I love you, man. Even if he said he hated me, I'd say I love you.
Knowing he believes in, knowing that he believes that people are unequal, knowing that
it's because I know that he believes that. That's why I would. I would actually be kinder to someone because I know they hate me.
All right. Do you, shorty?
I feel like a lot of people disagree with me on this.
Maybe that's coming from your strength as a man. Maybe that's coming because you're a not white, but you're white passing. You're a white cis man.
Okay.
You feel like you have the strength. You feel like you can approach that. If I saw a Nazi, I'd run the other way.
Okay.
Like, I'm a woman. I have a hijab on. I'm black. I don't have the privilege to assert myself as you would in that space.
Wouldn't being aggressive back be?
I didn't say aggressive.
Assertive?
I didn't say aggressive.
Okay. What do you mean?
But you're
then?
saying you would.
What would you do in that situation then?
I'd probably find safety and get out of the situation.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying, like, rather than be kind.
You think I'd beat him up?
I don't know. You were saying you don't owe him that. So
yeah, I don't owe them a hug.
If you're saying not owe him a hug, I was thinking vice versa must.
The thing
be
is,
true.
like, what you're saying is very idealistic. But for someone who has so many boxes of I have like so many boxes that oppresses me. I don't have the time to be hugging everybody and giving everyone a kiss and giving everyone a forgiveness and telling them you're amazing. That's too much for me. But maybe for someone, like I told you, you're a white, cis man who probably experiences some sort of oppression, once every 2 weeks? A microaggression once every month?
It's usually because of my name, but nothing more.
Nothing more. For me, it's
because
weekly.
you carry Islam as a skin. I think you've mentioned that.
Yeah, no, like I'm literally everything physically appearing on me. So I don't have the time to always give people oh, it's all right. It's okay that you did microaggression. Just the other day, like, I was at the airport. The lady was just, like, touching my socks too much. And I was literally, like, she was just like, I have to go through your socks. I was just like, all right. And it was literally just my jeans and my socks. And, like, she was just like, I'm so sorry. And I was, like, kind of, like, late to my flight after that. For, like, you know, it was just, like, one of those moments I couldn't be like, oh, it's okay. It's okay. Mm-hmm. You really didn't have to, like, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't want to do that. Like, you know, I can't keep doing that every day.
Okay, yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, I get what you mean. So, walk me through a little bit what your experience was growing up in this country, though. Mm. How often did you go through anti-Islamic rhetoric or racist rhetoric? And which one did you find to be more dominant, prominent?
I would definitely say that Islamophobia. I know during, we moved here, like, during, like, 9/11, so 2000-ish. I do remember my sister was bullied really bad, actually in Howard County, to the point where the school didn't do anything and we had to change schools for her, my older sister.
How was she bullied? Can you kind of explain?
Osama bin Laden, this, that, just, like, harassment at school. The school didn't do anything. It was early 2000s. I don't think they took bullying and harassment seriously back then. And then in middle school, I do remember, you know, being called a terrorist and go back to your country and, like, all that fun stuff. So I think I experienced that more.
Yeah, dig into it. Tell me a little bit more. Like, people won't understand where you're coming from until you give them graphic stories or narratives.
Yeah.
Unless you don't remember it or wouldn't like to talk about it.
It mostly that that's, like, the biggest one that's happened to me. But I just do know it was mostly the microaggressions is that I kind of harbored the most. It would be as simple as, like, I remember when my siblings got married. One and then the next one got married like 2 years later. I was asked, like, oh, was it arranged? And, like, little things like that. Like, or whenever I would speak and they'd be surprised my accent. I didn't have a Sudanese accent. Or it would be like, where are you from? And then I'd say Maryland. They'd be like, where are you really from? So it would be the little ones that would just etch at me all the time. And it would be the fear of something happening. The paranoia is what got to me, too. Because I think that one, especially during the Trump situation, I went to school in American University, and that was in D.C., so I was around the inauguration. I was working near Capitol Hill. So it was just like I was in the city all the time. And I do remember during the inauguration, like, my grandma called me because I was living in D.C. at the time. She was just like, don't wear your hijab, put a hat on. And I was like, wow, like, Haboba said that, grandma said that. It was kind of like I just, you know, didn't leave my home. The Muslim ban happened. Sudan was on that list. That one impacted me greatly also because at that time my sister was pregnant. Her husband couldn't come to the States. Like, that was really devastating for me. And knowing that they were not letting immigrants in the country or not letting refugees in, and, like, knowing that that could have been me 20 years ago, you know, when the government wanted, you know, to kill our family. You know, I was lucky enough to not have had Trump in office because I wouldn't have been able to, you know, happen. So those are the main ones that really come to mind. And yeah, so those are the main ones. And just, you know, just not feeling included when you enter a space. I think after a while, when you just enter a space and you just see all white people, or you see maybe two other people of color, and you're just like, oh, I have to do this all over again. I have to tell people where I'm from. I have to make sure they don't think I'm the super extremist Muslim. Like, I gotta, you know, let them know I'm hip and cool, or, like, you know, all those silly stuff. Or yeah, I think those are just the main ones. I think it's just the little ones that just bite at you. More than, like, a huge traumatic one. I've had my mother also get yelled at, harassed at a restaurant, you know, called all these names and whatnot. So it was nothing major traumatic happened to me in terms of, like, a huge harassment where, like, law enforcement was involved, but the ones I do remember were just, like, the tiny ones that just etch out at you, and the ones knowing that, you know, I'm still gonna experience it next week. You know, the possibility of what if one day somebody decides not to, you know, not to like my hijab or want to pull it off, or what if I want to go somewhere where there's predominantly white supremacists, you know?
I think the hijab plays a big role in something that us as men especially men that aren't, well, all, I'm not even going to say especially men that aren't Muslim, because even Muslim men, we just do not understand or grasp the fear that comes with wearing a hijab in this country. Because we just can't until we actually experience it, which we won't experience it. So that's the problem. And like you said, I am very happy to pass around, walking around, and look like a regular American, while you, at the end of the day, have to carry your religion, as you called it in your book, like a soldier, like wearing a uniform, always having to fight this attack by the media that started with the media.
And represent, like we were talking about earlier. In that one moment, you get to, when you hug that Nazi or whoever, if you hug them, you represent Islam for 1 minute. But the thing is, I represent Islam 24/7. So I can't always be on my preppy
right,
behavior,
but I think I experienced very similar situations like you. All those microaggressions, I mean, this guy has been there for some of them. He's witnessed the people ask me about my name and what's up with it, and they're like, your name's Muhammad, you don't look Indian. Or all the microaggressions that you're talking about, people have asked me, will I have arranged marriages, all that kind of stuff. And I've witnessed my mom when I was 6, get flicked off by an Asian man and spit on. And called a terrorist. So I experienced those things, and it hasn't shaken me away from the fact that I think that it's, and I think Muslim girls in America especially do a better job at this than men. At the end of the day, we're always representing Islam one way or the other, and if someone thinks of us as violent, terrorist, oppressed people, and when they come to confront us about that, and we tell them, listen, and we show them violence in our speech or in our tone, then they'll be like, oh yeah, I was right.
So what? So what if?
But I don't.
Right?
But
we're all individuals. We're allowed to,
I think one of our biggest, as Muslims, and I don't think we should take on the ideas of other minority groups. Sure, they can go ahead and say that, and I see, for example, the black community. I understand completely if the black community says we don't owe you an explanation as to who we are. We don't owe you to prove to you who we are. I understand that, because the African American community in America for 400 years has suffered one of the biggest humanitarian crises, and in my opinion, the biggest humanitarian crisis to have ever existed on earth in all of human history. I understand the black community, but us as Muslims, we're a minority, and we haven't really suffered nearly anywhere near the African American community. And it's in my opinion that it is our duty as Muslims to represent, and in the face of ignorance, to show kindness. I think it's a Quranic lesson, and I think it's a prophetic lesson. And I know a lot of people don't agree with me.
Yeah.
So
I want to